Hello and welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have interesting strangers on every single week. Today, if you want to introduce yourself, we have two people on the podcast today.
I'm April.
I'm Tomas Sluiter.
And you guys are the owners of Culmination Brewing, which is really awesome. I actually have some of your beer in my fridge currently, so it's great stuff. And so I wanted to start off by asking you guys, how did you two even meet in the first place?
You have to roll back to 1994, Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. We were working at a bakery together.
So was it back in Michigan then that you started experimenting? Like, when did you start getting interested in like brewing beer and the whole craft beer scene in general? When was that?
It was in the early 90s, into the mid 90s. Michigan was one of the first states to have a really good craft brewery with bells, and that's the first time I remember having a craft beer that wasn't imported from somewhere or sitting on a shelf for ages. A really nice, beautiful, well done, fresh craft beer. And
so, what was the first beer that you made, like as a home brewer?
It would have been like an extract kit, which was an IPA that came with its own little bundle of wood chips. It's way back in like 1990. I think.
How did it turn out?
It wasn't great.
And so from that, what made you want to like stick with it and keep brewing beer and getting to the point now where you have your own brewery?
Well, I mean, it's like any other hobby that someone may become enamored with. You just keep diving into the wormhole of knowledge and gadgets and things. And I never really anticipated it being my career until after I'd moved to Portland. I was in a television broadcast early in my career, and I thought that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I moved out here and got a job as an assistant brewer, and then became the head brewer. And then, before you know it, 10 years flies by, and then 15 years flies by, and then things end up the way they end up.
So what was the, I guess, initial idea for starting a brewery? Was it just something that was sort of far-fetched, or was it something that you took seriously when you started getting into the brewing scene and were like, this is what I want to do? Or were you happy working at other places?
I had my own vision of how I want to do things. And we just decided one day to just go ahead and dive in. And yeah, we sold our house. We bought a house when we moved here in 2000. And, it was one of those, it was in that era where you could still buy a house in Portland for under $200,000.
Sure.
We lived there for 9 years or so and did a lot of work to it and sold it for like $360,000. We put much of that money into the brewery, and then we also did some traveling. I think we worked pretty hard, all in all, to get to where we're at. Working on the house, selling the house, crawling through the grind of the SBA loans, and finally it happened.
Yeah, because does traveling have anything to do with the fact, like, because your beer, from looking you up and researching you, is very big in like Japan and other countries. Like, how is that connection with Portland? Because I actually talked to Reverend Nat Cider, and his cider's also in Japan. So it's interesting, like there are several, it seems like, Portland establishments that are big in Asia.
Well, Tokyo really drives the trends for Japan, and Tokyo has a kinship with Portland, and it was sort of fostered by a lot of influential Japanese expats living in Portland, and the Japanese American Society of Oregon and Travel Oregon, like spending a fair amount of time fostering those relationships. I was introduced to our partner out there, Aoki-san, who's also our distributor partner, several years ago by Red. He runs a blog, an English-Japanese blog about craft beer. His main job is translation for a big company, but his passion and love is craft beer and cultural connections with people. So I was introduced to Aoki-san through Red, and I had mentioned to Aoki-san that we've been interested in Japanese culture for a long time, and April's best friend from Japan, and we would regularly get together, and she would cook us Japanese dishes, and I was very much into sake at the time. I had taken the sake professional classes, which are kind of akin to like wine sommelier classes, and even took a part-time job while I was a full-time beer brewer here in Portland. I took a part-time job at Sake One out in Forest Grove just to kind of be around sake, learn more about it, learn more about the process. And then so when he tried our beer, he liked our beer and agreed to start importing it. We wanted to go to Japan and support the brand, which wasn't something that a lot of the breweries did at the time. Because running a brewery, it's all consuming, but we wanted to prioritize like establishing these relationships. And culturally, that goes a long ways. So not only were we sending out a top-notch product, but we went there and met the players and the bar owners and fellow brewers and shook their hands and had drinks with them. Those are the things that can't be created just by having a can on the shelf. Putting a human face to the can on the shelf goes a long ways.
Because how does that process work? Do they brew the beer there with your recipes, or do you have to ship it over there, brewing it here?
We ship it over there. We are currently in the process of opening a Culmination in Takamatsu, Japan. And it's our business partner, Aoki-san, who's the investor in that project. And we will be creating some Culmination over there. So the plan is to still brew like the mainstays like Phaedrus and Pilsner and Sourflower and continue to ship those out of Portland. But now we can be experimental and make a lot of interesting creative beers using some of the fruits that are available there in Japan. Takamatsu is known as an island garden. As soon as travel opens up, we'll be heading that way for a while to commission that system, establish the SOPs, train some people.
With that, like because you worked as a consultant, right, for a while at different like breweries and things like that. Did that help you when you were trying to start the brewery, as in like seeing what you liked and what you didn't like, or what worked and didn't work? And how did that sort of shape what became Culmination when you started?
Yeah, I mean, that works both ways. Like as a consultant, like I get to see different creative paths. And then as a business owner, as a brewery owner, I get to share my personal experiences to that effect with my potential clients. I haven't really been doing much consulting of late, just because when the pandemic hit, I needed to spend more time focusing on Culmination here. And during startup, I didn't do a whole lot of consulting either. The startup is pretty much all consuming. But in a few years after startup, or as startup started to taper off, and before the pandemic, I was in Montana for a while with a startup, and I started up a brewery, a couple of breweries in Japan. I had to fix process flow for a big brewery in Hong Kong. So I flew back here and then wound up I needed to stay here and sort of reinvent Culmination anyway.
Yeah, because I was curious if you like ran into anything like you see on those restaurant shows on TV that just like are terrible, and they have to like redo all these things, or they're like nightmares or something. Did you run into any of that stuff, or was it mostly just like changing procedural things to help make things better?
There is a client of another project here in the U.S. that I hadn't been there in a while, and I flew over and I took a look around their hot side, and there was some pretty disgusting things there. I did feel a little like Gordon Ramsay freaking out when he sees rotted avocados in the refrigerator.
Yeah,
I was like, "This is disgusting."
Then storm out.
Yeah.
Starting a brewery in Portland is definitely a tougher thing because there's just a lot of breweries. So how did you like plan to, with like what beers you're going to make or what your philosophy is going to be to like stand out from all the other breweries that were popping up?
It kind of goes both ways. Opening a brewery in Portland it's certainly tough to differentiate yourself and stand out, but it's not harder, I don't think, opening a brewery in Portland many other places. Portland supports their breweries really well. Like, there's a lot of craft beer drinkers in Portland. So the market is pretty big. What we decided to do when we opened was start with a relatively small footprint brew deck, give the hot side as much flexibility as possible so that we could do parallel batches and still, in the course of a single day, roll into a bigger tank for mainstay beers. The original goal is like year 5, which was last year, was to open a bigger production facility and keep the existing facility as a pilot facility. But the economics and like the overall direction of the craft beer industry, it hasn't really worked out like that. The new growth model is to keep yourself pretty flexible on production side and then open up tap rooms, which is what most of the other breweries our size is doing. And we're looking at a couple of spaces right now. Because in wholesale, the shelves, the market shelves, kind of shrinking, and distributors aren't extremely helpful in maintaining your presence in their ever-growing portfolio. Trying to just create all your revenue, aside from your own brewery taproom revenue, through the wholesale channels is just becoming more and more difficult. So the idea of I was thinking $5 million into a big production facility that's going to rely even more on wholesale channels is much less appetizing than staying flexible and opening up your own retail spots.
Yeah, because as a brewer yourself, like what do you think your like philosophies are? Yeah, just your general practices as a brewer that sort of steer you in the direction of like the beers that you make.
Well, we try to make beers that we like and we like drinking. And as professional brewers, we're constantly curious about what's out there and what other breweries are doing. Just recently, for example, we made a cold IPA, which is basically a new take on like an IPL, but more well done. With a better method. And the first one was made by Kevin Davies of Wayfinder, and people started talking about it. So we went, as me and my crew, we went and tried it, and we're like, this is really nice. So we kind of read up on how what his technique was, and we made one ourselves. And that's kind of like a microcosm of the craft beer world by and large. It's very trendy, and like, breweries are constantly like being inspired by each other. But what we try to do is like sort of have like, walking down the path with 3 feet. 1 foot is firmly rooted in tradition. We want to make a Pilsner that's spot on Pilsner. And 1 foot is firmly rooted in like innovation and creativity. And then, 1 foot is rooted in just trying to be as like unique and crazy as we can, and also like following these trends.
Yeah. So what kind of beer is that you just talked about? Like I don't think I'm familiar with what that is.
Cold IPA. So it's basically a beer that's brewed with a lager yeast at more warmer ale temperatures, lightly hopped for bittering with more traditional lower alpha acid European noble hops. And then the finish hops and the whirlpool and on the cold side, which gives you the aromas, are more tropical, danky, new gen of New Zealand hops.
Like pretty recently, you guys raised like almost $500,000, $400,000 for new equipment and a canning line and stuff like that. I mean, it's not. I mean, that's a ton of money. So, were you guys surprised by the? You talked about sort of how supportive people are of the craft beer industry out here, but even with that, were you surprised by the amount that people were willing to invest in your brewery?
I was a little surprised because, I mean, being a consultant and in the industry for so long, those kind of numbers aren't eye-popping anymore. Like $400,000 for a new can line, that's just what it is. I was a little surprised because this was more or less like a crowdsourcing thing, and it was relying on $100 from this person, $50 from this person. I think our biggest contribution was like $30,000 from someone down in California. I think it went for like 3 months, And in 2.5 months, we were only at like 180, 200,000. And the SMBX guys who have done this with other places were like, don't worry, everything comes in at the last minute. And then all of a sudden, it was just like this massive pop of contributions that came in. I mean, SMBX had to start giving contributions back because we were over the limit. And it worked out well for us because when the pandemic hit, we lost all of our on-premise sales, which is like other tap rooms selling our kegs. That's what's known as on-premise in the wholesale world. So we had to switch almost all of our output through wholesale into cans. And when that means that you're bringing a mobile cannery into your facility once a week, it means you're not making any money on your revenue. Like you're giving all the margins away. And wholesale's taking 30%, craft canning's taking another 20%, and the cost of goods are going up. So it's like you might as well not even do it at that point. So by bringing in our own can line, we get to make ourselves a little more flexible on what we can, but we also recovered that margin. It's definitely daunting to take on a debt load of a big number like that, especially when you're coming out of the pandemic and wholesale on premise still isn't recovered. But just looking at those numbers, like that's absorbed in the cash flow of what we're already paying. Like the debt service premium on that number is less than what we were paying to craft canning for the same amount of product going out the door. Yeah. And it has accelerated returns because, as we grow, we'll have like better margin on all the revenue.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite like beer that you've created or a beer that has meant the most to you at Culmination? I
really like the beer that we did as one of the first collaborations, actually the first collaboration with a Japanese brewery here in Portland. And it was a collaboration with a Issei Kedoya, and the beer was called Amaterasu. And they had found a unique strain of Saccharomyces yeast that they had isolated from the Shinto garden, the first Shinto garden ever in Japan that's like many hundreds of years old. They kind of described to me the characteristics of that yeast. Seemed a lot akin to like a Belgian wheat yeast. So they brought it over. Well, actually, they shipped it over a couple of small samples, and I sent it to Imperial Yeast Labs, and they propped it up for us. And then we brewed the beer kind of akin to a wit, where we used oats, a little bit of, but instead of orange peel, I sourced some California yuzu. And then we put in a touch of coriander, and I think that was my favorite beer that we did, maybe in the whole course of Culmination. And we haven't really brewed that one again. For a while, a Fury wanted a version of it, but just the sheer economics and the availability of yuzu, we were switched to using a yuzu extract, and to me, it lost a lot of its charm. And then we also moved away from that yeast because propping a unique yeast for a batch once every couple of months, it wasn't economically feasible. So we're not doing that beer for us. That beer was also fine, but it didn't have that kind of magical charm of the first one.
Putting a face to the beer. Like, why do you think people have reacted so positively to your beer and your brewery over the first or over 5 years that you guys have been going?
Well, I mean, we do make a good product, and we're able to keep it creative because we have that small and flexible system. So if you come into our tap room, you're going to see 20 of our unique fresh beers on the board. Most breweries have a bigger system, so they have a better economy of scale. And in a lot of ways, they're more set up to succeed with a better economy of scale. But it limits their creative output, and you might see 7 beers on the board. Or 5 beers with like 3 rotating seasonals. So I think just being able to constantly put something new out there and keep people interested goes a long ways. And also it gives us the opportunity to ask our team to be creative. We recently hired a new brewer. She was with Fort George for a while, and she's been on board for a couple of months now, and we just debuted her beer in the tap room. Because she, the first thing we do when we hire a new brewer is think about a beer you want to brew on the system. And she did a tropical IPA that has pineapple and toasted coconut. And we hopped it a little bit with Eldorados, which have that kind of like candied tangerine notes to them. So it's a great hot weather beer. So you should come in. And if I can get this beer slushy machine up and running that just got delivered to us yesterday, that's the first beer that's going to go into the slushy machine. So when it's 190 degrees out, come in and enjoy like a frozen tropical IPA.
That sounds actually really good. I think so. Like when you guys are like pitching ideas for like what you want to do, I know that you guys have like recipes for stuff, but like when you're trying to think about like new ideas, is it sort of just like a free for all? Like maybe we should throw this in there. Maybe that would be good. Like how does the process work for like creating something brand new?
Well, between myself and my director of operations and like our sort of creative partner, Bryson and Darren, we have a lot of experience in recipe development. So, we bounce things off each other. And I said earlier, we throw things against the wall and see what sticks. That's more like conceptual. But when it comes down to making a recipe, we rely on a pretty advanced knowledge base of what's going to happen. So, we sit down and kind of methodically will develop these recipes.
Where can people find out more information about the brewery, your hours, and you said you might be opening some new tap rooms and stuff like that? Where can people like keep up to date with everything that's going on?
So just visit our Facebook page and our Instagram page. And we're currently trying to get into the TikToks. I know I sure ancient when I say that, but I hear it's all the new thing these days. So we're going to open a TikTok account and have some of our staff start to put on some interesting, lively, and whimsical content.
Yeah, I've never ventured into the TikTok world, but yeah, I also have heard it's quite popular. So I'm sure it'll go well. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Stay cool. Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. Your beer is awesome. So thank you so much.
Hey, what do you have in your refrigerator, by the way?
I actually don't know. It's an IPA. Want me to go check?
Sure.
No, I actually want to go check. Phaedrus or Phaedrus? Is that how you?
Phaedrus. Oh, Phaedrus. Okay.
Yeah.
So a flagship. Yeah.
That's what I got. Yeah.
Hey, we're admiring your plants. You have a green thumb.
Oh yeah. Me and my partner. And this is only part of them. There's like a bunch over there too. Yeah, we have about 30 plants in here, I think. So it's quite a lot.
Have you been to our tap room?
No, I haven't. I haven't yet.
You should come because we partnered with a woman. Her business is called Green Guys.
Oh.
And she has like the greenest thumb I've ever seen. And with her help, we've converted our tap room and the outdoor space under the tent into like a jungle. It's like a tropical paradise. There's all these beautiful species of trees and climbers, and it really makes things aesthetically pleasing.
So yeah, have a great day, guys, and stay cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.